Amazing result for Fulham, brilliant. We'll talk about them in a moment, but Mike, we've got to talk about Manchester United. What impact is that result going to have?
Well, that's probably, to say disappointing would be an understatement. I think it's more devastating than anything else. You know, you saw there, Fulham did to Manchester United what Manchester United normally do to other teams, which is win the game when they have to. You know, in the last minute of a game, they pop up and score a goal. Fulham did that to level the game. But it was an unbelievable game, really, from a tactic point of view, you know, where you see Fulham defending, game plan working, then it wasn't working, and then it's back on track again. So, you know, all credit to Fulham. The game plan came out on top in the end, but massive disappointment for Manchester United. They should really be winning football matches with all that attempts on goal and crosses going in the box, but the quality wasn't really there.
And you talk about the stats in the game. We can take our time looking at these. Jamie, have you ever seen anything like this before? With the 31 attempts, 9 on target, but beyond that, look at the number of passes. Record number since Opta began in terms of crosses, 81. Massive amount of touches, as you would expect, 904. There's another page of this as well. 75% possession. I mean, just look at all. They're breaking records left, right and centre, yet it finishes 2-2. It was just balmy, wasn't it?
It was, but I wouldn't look at those stats and say that shows how well Man United played. I think the way Fulham played, you were going to batter them on possession stats. Fulham looked more comfortable out of possession. You'd always thought they were in more trouble when they had the ball. They didn't really know what they wanted to do, but they were always set in those two-banker four, and I've never seen a team defend so deep in my life. Normally, if you go to a tough venue, you might say, OK, we'll get to the edge of the box. These were at times on the 6-yard box. In the second half, Darren Bent, who came on as a centre-forward, was clearing the ball on the penalty spot with his head. And I think for one of the goals, Van Persie put it in, they got a player defending on the line. So they were so deep that you would expect those stats. So I don't think it's something to say how well Manchester United played, because at times they found it very difficult. More crosses than we've ever had, as you mentioned, in up the stats. But it wasn't the quality of crossing that you'd expect from Man United.
Those stats can give you probably a false impression from the point of view that it can hurt Man United more because they dominated in possession but didn't win the game. You know, and you can harp on about it's great to have possession, but in reality, that's not what always the game is about. It's about winning the game and creating chances to score goals. That's the important thing, and it just wasn't enough.
One more stat for you. Have a look at the average positions during the game. Does this tell the story? This is as far as Manchester United are concerned. See where their players were with Van Persie up the top. Then just look at the Fulham players, all but one in their own half, Jamie.
But as I mentioned before, I wouldn't say that was Man United forcing them back. I think they've come here as a tactic. The defensive record is awful. So
is that the plan then?
Obviously, right from the start, we could see that right from the kick-off. Now, we looked at Reether at right back. He was basically played with 4 centre-backs, really, at times a back 6. Now, we were speaking in the game, weren't we, that you can imagine they've worked on that 11v11 all week at the training ground. When the ball gets switched, we all moved over, we push out, we drop off. You can see they've worked on that all week. Now, they've got what they wanted. It looked like they wouldn't in the end, because I think when you defend that deep and take that much pressure, eventually something will happen.
So why couldn't United break that down? Gary kept talking about composure in the final third for United. Was that the problem?
Well, the crosses. Man United are a crossing team. The crossing today was very poor. And also, they've had so many bodies at times, Fulham, in that box. It is difficult to score off a cross. But we see the goal when they go 2-1 up, Carrick. That's what they needed. Sometimes the ball's come on back, people on the edge of the box coming on.
I think the variety in the play wasn't there. It was all about crossing the ball. You know, you don't put that many crosses into a game without, you know, thinking to yourself, well, is there anything else? Because that hasn't worked. It hasn't worked well enough. Can you start manipulating, you know, the play? Can you play those little give and goes and try and force Fulham to do something different? But it looked as though Fulham were really, really comfortable at saying, well, OK, throw the balls in. And as a centre-half, and Jamie can tell you that, sometimes you go into a game where you're happy for that ball to come in the box as a centre-half because your job is to deal with that. And they did it terrific, really. At times they were putting their head in there. Even at the end there, the centre-backs were coming in there and heading it. And the one thing that probably let them down was United's second goal, where the centre-halves come out, not really challenge Rooney well enough, and they get a goal.